the core program. We are second on this. Yes, Senator.
Let me tell you, I like this bill 228, but I got a lot of questions, not bad questions. I need some questions I just need to get clarified in my mindset. Are we anticipate passing this bill today?
Yes. But you can ask all the questions you want, and we have Ross here to answer those questions. He helped draft the bill and work on the
I
bill.
got quite a few. Okay.
Well, you know, I'm not cutting you off.
But Ross, will Ross be available later on? Well, we voting today, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'll need to ask the questions, and if they're satisfactory, you'll vote for it. If you don't like it, you'll speak to why not, or if you've got 5 or 6 votes, then maybe we'll hold it off.
That's
But
not
I know
about
the
my
Senate
vote.
President wants to
I'm
move it.
not voting against the bill,
Well,
but I think I'd like to have an opportunity to fully engage and get.
Senator?
Okay, I don't usually like that many
No,
questions.
no.
I
I'm
really-
telling you.
And I'm saying this because it's on the same path of something I had already developed too, and I was just, I talked with Gazone about it, and he's supposed to be getting back to me. I haven't heard anything from him, but
I'm sorry, the who?
Gazone.
The governor.
No, Guy Gazone.
Oh,
Well, I talk for him from a financial standpoint. So I'll.
no, you're going to have the opportunity to ask the questions.
Okay.
So, and ask him as long as you got them.
Okay.
Ross, why don't you go to the table? Okay,
I don't know why you didn't come around early and talk to us, Russ.
so you want to very briefly just refresh our memory?
Yeah.
SB 228, Maryland Corps Program Revisions. This bill makes significant changes to the Maryland Corps program, including allowing participants to transition to the workforce as well as to an institution of higher education. Under the restructured Maryland Corps, in addition to other specified expenses, a program funding is to be used to 1. Expand the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, 2. Create a Maryland Civilian Climate Corps, and 3. Create a Maryland Historic Trust Trades Corps. The Maryland Corps Board of Directors is restructured and established as a separate body with an executive director and authority to hire staff directly. Accordingly, the bill removes the responsibility for program staffing from the Governor's Office on Service and Volunteerism and removes program administration from an operator selected via request for proposals. The governor must appropriate the following amounts to the Maryland Corps Program Fund: $5 million in fiscal 2024, $10 million in fiscal 25, $15 million in fiscal 26, and $20 million in fiscal 27, and each fiscal year thereafter. There was a packet yesterday. There was an amendment by the B&T Committee from which this is coming that added co-sponsors, clarifies some language for the provision of stipends and board regulations, and clarifies language regarding the purpose of the Maryland Civilian Climate Corps. Yes, and on last Friday, the following individuals asked to be co-sponsors: Senators Washington, Ellis, Hester, Lamb, and Pinsky.
So, to give it some context, and I'm going to throw it off to Ross in a moment, who's here on behalf of the Senate President. There's a new umbrella board, newly constituted, 7 people, 2 from the Senate President, the Speaker, and the Governor, and all 3 of those individuals come up and select a chair. Correct?
Just quickly to clear, the Senate President and the Speaker jointly appoint the chair.
Okay. And among those 7 people, some are targeted where they have workforce development, et cetera, et cetera.
Expertise in the area of organizations that will be funded through the program.
And then under this umbrella will be 3 core, or cores, I don't know. Core. Is core plural? You never pronounce that. Okay. 3 core, the Chesapeake Bay Conservation Corps, which already has its own mini board over it. The Environment Parks Corps that deals with the outdoors primarily, and then this Workforce Career New Corps?
Yes, the only other clarification is that this is a list of allowable uses that is included but not limited to. And so there are.
Could be more.
Yes,
Okay, and one other, and any money from the budget gets deposited in the Maryland Umbrella Corps, and then it gets filtered down to those three or possibly more subcorps.
correct. And there's a differentiation between large-scale employers and community-based programs. And so not to overcomplicate things, but we want to make sure that there are multiple paths, and so there are organizations that may have a capacity to hire one or two core members to serve at a local project. Those projects would be funded in addition to larger scale programs like that of the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, for example.
Anderson, why don't you start with your questions? And don't hold back.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair. And let me just set the record, I am not here to destroy this bill, okay? I'm only here because I have a vast interest in the scope of this program, and not for 1 year, but for 25 years. And I know how important this bill is for those that live in my part of the county. I know how important it is for those who don't get a chance to go on to college for whatever reason. And I think it's high time that we seriously start thinking about how we're going to close the gap by providing folks at the bottom of this pay scale or wherever the skills they would need to become gainfully employed. And I've often said, and I said today too, because I wanted part of the record, you know, we talking about a population that got 25% independence. You know, we're from the same county, roughly somewhere between 20 and 25% of our students don't go on to college after high school. That's a large population of students. So I don't think we're thinking out of the box as often as we should, because where do you think those young folks are going to go in terms of getting employment? You think they're going to end up in a community, not have a way of life? May not be the right one, but they're going to make some ends to get some of the things that they want. So I think and I'm not saying the president didn't do it here, but I do want to key in on some very specific things, like the large population of students that don't go on to college. And it hurt us financially, all the way down the pay scale. Because if we don't provide opportunity for added skills for folks that don't have them after high school, that's going to impact our own tax base. Because those folks are not coming, staying, buying homes, buying cars, and paying taxes. And one of the things I often get hit with in my district, when you start talking about good restaurants and development, well, we like to do it, but you don't have a population during the day because all your folks work out of town, work in Virginia, or work in D.C., because they can't, for whatever reason, seem to get employed in Prince George's County. So I just want us to have an open mind and look at this very carefully. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Off the bat, I don't know why we want to limit the program to 17 years to 23, the age where most folks get in trouble, somewhere between.
Yes, Senator, again, not to interrupt, but just to clarify, the bill that was passed in 2016 that set up Maryland Corps originally, that was limited to the ages of 17 to 23. The intent of this bill is to drastically expand eligibility, and so that, among some other provisions, has been cut, and there is no age limitation.
Okay, I didn't know that, really. Okay, the other area concerned nonprofit. What specific role will they play? And this is a great opportunity to get nonprofits involved, but I could not understand quite clearly how their role is going to be. Like if I look on page 3, are they going to be doing child care, transportation, all those kind of things?
So I think there are a few ways in which nonprofits could be involved here. One is as a placement site, so an organization like, let's say, Reading Partners, that provides tutoring in schools. The program is envisioned to scale up funding in a way that Reading Partners would be able to hire additional core members, provide them to schools where the students would benefit. So that's one example. Another example is a regional operating partner. The regional operating partner is kind of the middle entity between the Maryland Core Board that has a statewide view and the local organizations that are actually placing core members in different service slots. And so the regional operating partners understand the unique geographic needs of different parts of the state, be it the Eastern Shore, Central Maryland, Prince George's, Southern Maryland, and are able to relay the needs of each unique geographic region and where we should be investing in scaling up service slots based on those unique needs.
Okay, next question. About the board. You know, I understand the president and the speaker will appoint the chair of the board. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Why is it that way?
I think it really is a question of trying to simplify the process to the extent possible. There is no kind of broad intent here beyond trying to make sure that actually, let me clarify. Part of this is, in addition, right now, assuming that this bill is to pass, because we are in an election year, there actually is a prohibition on the governor making appointments after the primary election date. I apologize, I am just remembering this through the drafting process. And so the governor would not be able to appoint at this time if the appointment takes place after the primary. And so we want to make sure that this board is able to get up and running. We're talking about a $5 million investment and the ability to scale up the ability for people to serve in the state. We don't want to hinder that because a chair is unable to be appointed on this board.
Okay. Just to remind you, we just spent about 15 to 20 minutes talking about why boards should not elect their own chair and co-chair in lieu of being appointed by, as they quoted, the hierarchy. It sort of take away, and I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but it was a major question. Now, this program, I noticed on page, one page in here, talking about 2017. Is that a mistake?
Do you mind, I apologize, but do you mind
Senator,
clarifying?
where do you see that, Senator?
On page,
Senator, that is language that is being struck as well. That was language from the
why
original.
don't we have the right page or document? Maybe I missed it or something?
I believe the language is bracketed, and so being cut. But again, that's from 2016 legislation that was never fully funded or implemented.
Oh, okay. So the program, I did read someplace where it was enacted, and that's where you're talking about, would have been the 17th if it had gone through as been proposed.
Correct. The funding was an allowable use in 2016, unfortunately was never funded by the governor, and so this is putting in a mandatory appropriation moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, on page 7, line 16 through line 20 on page 8, that all comes out. There's
Okay.
friends.
Okay. Well, I know I had more questions someplace, and I didn't highlight them. Some of them I did. Sure, okay, good.
Just to give this the 30,000 foot, it's at least 100 people who will work 9 months to a year or so at, I think, $15 an hour, I read, what's becoming the state minimum wage.
Correct.
That's correct?
Yes.
And they will be assigned, if a nonprofit says, we've got a slot to do one of these things, the bay, the outdoors parks, or whatever, they can say, we would like 3 people. They'll collect the money from the Maryland Corps to pay them. These people, young or maybe not young, will get an experience of a year, which hopefully will lead them to some other employment.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Senator Washington, then we'll come back to Senator Patterson.
Thank you. I have a question about clarification on, I know there's some amendments in the works. On page 4, lines 7 through 9, when it talks about exemption from the procurement article, could you?
Yes, so because we are setting up a quasi-public entity to administer the Maryland Corps funding, the language mirrors that of a number of other quasi-public entities in the Economic Development Code. One of the exemptions is for the state finance and procurement article, but this ensures that any MBE, WBE requirements remain a part of what the Maryland Corps Board must adhere to. And so this keeps minority business enterprise as part of the requirement.
Okay, and so that's the part where it says, except as provided for Title 14, Subtitle 3. Is that the part that specifically references WMBE and WBE?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great, thank you.
More time, Senator Patterson. We'll go to Senator Hester, then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also really like this bill. I was just curious about the funding, and it looks like you start off at $5 million in 2024 and go up $5 million each year. And I'm just curious, how many people does that correspond to having in the program? And do you think that it will keep growing, or do you think that we might like front load it a little bit more?
So the intent of scaling up from 5 to 20 million is making sure that as a new board is constituted and as they are beginning their work, that there is not going to be unspent funds appropriated from the general fund. I will say that, and part of the intent behind this legislation is that AmeriCorps tends to provide stipends that are impossible for many people to constitute as a living wage. And so I can't remember exactly what the estimate is or wraparound services that may exist around housing, transportation, mental health services. And so this is a more costly program per placement than AmeriCorps. If I remember correctly, I think we're talking in the range, including the education award of $6,000 that is tax exempt, talking around $40,000 per placement. And so would scale up after you take into account operating expenses of the board, the hiring of staff, and marketing of the program to gain participants.
I want to underscore that point. I mean, it's X amount of dollars we're putting aside for numbers of students, not students, young potential employees who will get $15 an hour and some benefits along with it. That doesn't go real far, just so we understand that. And while the state is flush this year, you set up a program, you have to be able to maintain it. And 5 years from now, we don't know how much. And I think my sense is if we keep data and these kids really, this becomes a jumping off point, it'll make it easier to add funding to it in the outer years. I mean, I don't want to call this a pilot. I hope it's here. I hope it's successful. So, Senator Patterson, if you have some questions, then we'll go to Senator Washington.
Could you talk to the responsibilities of HBCUs?
Sure. So HBCUs come up in large part because it's around where we are trying to recruit core members from. And because HBCUs tend to be underrepresented in programs like AmeriCorps, because in large part it is individuals who are coming from wealthier backgrounds and can afford to take a couple of a year off with a lowly stipend. It is trying to balance out the underrepresentation in AmeriCorps and ensure that we have a more representative core across the state of volunteers than exists at the federal level.
That may be good, but I think you might get more for your bucks if you were to go directly to those communities, and those out there with the nonprofits, those who got strong community service association, the everyday folks that are out there. I don't usually go against what might be good for HBCUs, but I just think sometimes we got to be very strategic in terms of how we're going to recruit, who's going to do the recruiting. And I read this, and I don't think I know all the answers to those questions.
Well,
Will there be a bona fide staff available?
yes, there would be a staff dedicated to implementing the Maryland Core program. Part of what they would be doing is marketing. I would note that HBCUs are an area of prioritization, but there are other areas of prioritization as well, talking about high schools with low matriculation rates to four-year.
I'm going to interrupt you. If you have it in front of you, or if you have it on your screen, go to page 16.
That's where I am.
Lines 12 to 19. I think this is, you can read that, that's where Ross was actually going. And I think, Senator, the fourth one, line 19, youth who are disconnected from school or work, I think that's who I thought I heard you talking about, of trying to reach out to those folks as well.
Right.
I'm sorry, Ross. Didn't
No,
mean to
thank
interrupt
you. You took the words out of my mouth.
Okay.
Thank you. On page, what is it? On page 6, you talk about the board members, and then you talk about the staff and the executive director. Are these state employees? Are these PINs?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in the fiscal note, I can't remember exactly the number of recommended PINs, it may be 3. But yes, there's a recommendation as to the number of PINs. We want to make sure that state employees are complying with the same ethics provisions that exist for other state employees.
And I think, I know you might be looking at an amendment around this in terms of the recruitment, not just of the core members, but also the staff. There should be specific outreach to underrepresented groups, particularly in this space and environmental leadership. So the people doing the work, there's been a great deal of effort to integrate that, but when you look at the heads of the organizations, they're still not representative of the communities they serve. So I perhaps contemplate an amendment or a general statement around not only the core members, but also the staff.
Would agree with that, and would also say that one of the appointees is a either current core member or recent alumni for exactly
I like
that
that, yeah.
reason,
Yep.
to ensure broader representation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Recruitment. Say that again, how you plan to recruit?
So, Senator, I don't have a plan for that. They're creating a quasi-public board. The Maryland Core Board and its staff would be tasked with promulgating regulations and implementing the program. And part of that implementation is the marketing and recruitment. And so legislative language, we don't want to be overly prescriptive as far as requirements for the board. And so we try to give the board and staff clear guardrails and prioritization, but don't tell them specifically how to do their job.
That's not doing your job, that's understanding that you're going to be held accountable for spending money wisely.
And I believe there are provisions around audits that are built in, and so there will be accountability. It's not as though we're funding this and it's disappearing.
So you're going to pay the participants benefits and retirement and all that stuff?
So because this is it's a service year program, and so it is distinct from full-time employment, there are, again, talking about wraparound services and additional pieces. So in addition to the $15 an hour stipend, you're also talking about a $6,000 education award through a Maryland 529 program that is tax exempt and different than AmeriCorps education awards, where participants are hit with a tax bill when they spend that funding. You're also talking about health care, and health insurance is a requirement. There's a list, and I can try and find the specific page and line number for you, that goes into the list of wraparound services that is envisioned would be provided.
On page 3 of the bill.
Okay. All right. I think I'll pretty well exhausted most of my time. If I don't have an opportunity to ask additional questions, should I need it, I'll just put my stuff in writing and send it over to you and the president.
Please do. Thank you.
Okay.
Senator Simon Ayer.
Yeah, thank you. Got to talk to Ross a little before this, so I got several of my questions answered. Just from a high level, who are we trying to target, and what are we trying to get out? I heard it was a 9-month or a year program. What is the goal after that year?
So the target population are individuals who may not have graduated from high school, may have graduated but may not know what comes next, whether it be a 2 or 4 year institution, trade school, going into full-time employment. And so this is really meant to provide an opportunity for individuals who are mission-driven, want to contribute to their community, other communities around the state, to be able to serve based on unique needs, and then come out of the experience either with the education award to be able to pursue further in higher education or trade school certifications, or transition into full-time employment and be able to transition that 529 account to their kids, should they have them, or another individual.
Okay, so a couple things. One is I see they can go into childcare, transportation, things like that. So is that kind of work under somebody who's licensed and they kind of get a flavor of it? They're not necessarily getting the training, but they would hopefully go into some training so they could get the licensing?
So those are I think the list of wraparound services. So that is getting at an accessibility of the program. Again, one of the issues that we heard about AmeriCorps as we were researching the topic is that there are high barriers to entry. And so if an individual is a single parent and has a kid, it becomes difficult for them to serve. And so this is about providing childcare resources so that barriers to entry are removed.
Okay, so that would help them while they were doing this program?
Correct.
So what would they be getting into? Give me examples of something they would be doing in this program.
There are a bunch of examples. I'm a Teach for America alumni, for example. And so I taught middle school social studies in Baltimore City schools for 2 years. I'm not sure that that is a perfect analogy because you are paid through the school system.
Well, let me just ask you about that. So you said you went in and taught at middle school, but these are coming right out of high school, haven't graduated. How would they get in to teach middle school?
They would not. But the program, as we talked about, is not, we're not limiting it to a specific age range. And so it is envisioned that college graduates would be able to participate in service years as well if they so choose. And so, again, the target population, I think, is meant to be individuals who will benefit most from the workforce development pieces of the program, but that does not limit participation to others.
Okay, so if I can, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at the target, and I heard you say, the youth that haven't done it and they haven't graduated from school, high school, or lower matriculant rates. Right, that's 2 of them. And then the other 2 were trade schools and colleges and universities, which seem 2 different groups. One is really having a time to get into getting a job. The other ones are actively pursuing a career. I guess I'm trying to figure out, why are we targeting ones that are already on a career path opposed to targeting more of those who aren't on a career path?
I don't know that we are so much targeting so much as making sure that anybody who wants to serve, regardless of educational or other background, knows of opportunities that exist in the state, are able to match that opportunity with their interests and with their passions, and are then able to match with a potential service organization that has a slot available.
Okay, because that goes at the core of what because I'd like to support this. It goes at the core of what you're trying to accomplish, because I see on page 16, I think it was, you're targeting recruitment at the colleges and universities, historically black, and also trade schools. And in my limited knowledge on this, those are the people who are already working towards a career, they're engaged, and they're not necessarily the ones that aren't going to benefit from this educational environment, but the ones that aren't pursuing that would seem the ones we really should be targeting. So it proactively targets colleges and universities and trade schools and prioritizes them. So that's, I hear what you're saying, it doesn't mesh with what it
So
sounds like.
it does, and as I think Chair Pinsky spoke about when he went into the language itself on page 16, lines 12 through 19, those are two, again, of the priority areas, but the other two are high schools with low rates of matriculation and youth who are disconnected from school or work. And so we think that this is a comprehensive list, including those who may not have as clear of a path to full-time employment.
Okay, I'll let somebody else ask some questions.
I just want to comment on Senator Simoneau's assumption that every student that goes to college has a path. So maybe some of our children or our friends' children, they're in high school and they have an interest in a particular field, and you have a friend that has a business and you're able to set your child up to have an internship there. Or they go to college and they're able to spend their summers because your parents own, a defense subcontractor, or a doctor's office, and they're able to spend their summers, doing an unpaid internship or an internship job. And so there are a number of college students that have that experience. I would say that the majority of college students, some of whom are first-generation college, don't have those pathways or those persons that are able to get them into the situation where they can explore their interests. So college students do need this work, particularly first generation. College students don't have those types of opportunities. So I like that we should target our college students because not everybody has an in. The other thing I guess I wanted to ask about, if we could get back to it. If you were also contemplating, you're talking about expanding the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, and I know these are options, but there is also the Maryland Conservation Corps. Would you contemplate also, if there's an opportunity to expand that as well?
Yes, we would.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You guys don't know, but he never sees me. I kind of have to set up fireworks sometimes. Ross, thank you for being here and thank you for the legislation. I just have two brief questions.
Please.
First, page 11, lines 27 to 29. Can you just let me know, let us know, how you came up with that list, and whether there were other areas that you thought about. So we were in a meeting recently, Senator Patterson and I and some others, about the lack of metro accessible parks. And so if we're putting these people with parks, there may not be parks, or they might have allergies and they might not like being near blood for the public health piece. I mean, it just seems like just parks and just public health, there may be really wonderful students who would be interested in another option.
So again, these are not limited to, the reason that this was written into the bill is AmeriCorps is contemplating scaling up federal funding,
Yes.
specifically on these two core areas of the environment and of public health. And so we wanted to get ahead of where the federal government is going to be able to tap into that federal funding that is likely coming.
I'm all for that. I just wonder, environment is a much broader piece, as the chairman surely knows, than just state and local parks. So anyway, I tossed that out there for your consideration. The other piece, on page 15, lines 1 through 8, we just had, Senator Hester and I were just in a colloquy on another bill today, because we're used to seeing sort of boilerplate language that allows funds to accept money from other sources. And I didn't see that language in here, and I wonder whether that's on purpose, because it seems to me that we could have philanthropists and foundations and folks who would think this is a great place to support our young people and might want to donate. And I'm wondering whether you omitted that on purpose?
The intent of creating it as a quasi-public entity is specifically for that reason, that it can be a clearinghouse for private, foundation, and other dollars to come in.
Where, okay, I don't see that language, the typical language that we see in this legislation. And on page 15, again, lines 1 through 8, that's where you cover the sources of funding, but normally there's a and any other sources, and the fund will manage it and all that. Oh, good. Stacy has an answer.
So if you look on page 13, in line 15, it says any other money from any other source accepted for the benefit of the fund. So the fund does accept that.
13 line, I'm sorry,
Page 13, line 15, the fund consists of.
perfect. Existing language.
Yep.
Okay, that's why I missed it. Thank you very much, Ms. Goodman. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Senator Carrizo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ross, for the presentation. And I'm looking at just making sure I understand, we're combining, we're expanding the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. We are creating a Maryland Civilian Climate Corps, and then we're creating a Maryland Historic Trade Corps. So I'm going to focus on the first one, the expand the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. And I'm glad it said expand, because when I see that we're creating when we're creating a climate corps, I just wanted to make sure it wouldn't be at the expense of the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, because I'd like to point out, and I have to do this constantly, that I represent the Maryland coastal bays, and I know tends to be a focus on the Chesapeake, but we want to make sure that we're supporting our Maryland coastal bays. As a matter of fact, Sally was kind enough to join us on the visit that we did, that Maryland Coastal Bays sponsored this past summer. And I guess I'm asking, I see this as an opportunity that because we're expanding the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, that we would have projects that would support the Maryland coastal bays.
Absolutely. And I will say that is the intent of the regional operating partners that understand the local needs. And so would imagine that there would be one on the Eastern Shore, understanding the coastal bay needs and being able to match interested participants with organizations doing that work.
And for the record, they already have a working relationship and have had some of the individuals participate. I'm just looking at it also that since we're expanding the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, that Maryland Coastal Bays may also be able to seek additional support for some of the priority projects for the Maryland Coastal Bays from them. So in addition to the individuals who would do the 9 or 12 months, which they usually average one a year with the Maryland Coastal Bays, but we could also Maryland Coastal Bays could identify some projects that may need additional support. And given that we're expanding the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, that would be a logical place to go for additional support.
Sure, and I think that this is about if the coastal bays are interested in bringing on additional participants, this would provide funding for them to be able to do that for the projects that you speak about.
Okay, thank you. I thought that would be the answer, but I wanted it for the record. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, no other questions. I would say one comment, Russ, and I don't know if it needs language or it can be included from the floor, or maybe it's not necessary. One thing we've learned, MHEC has done a terrible job of explaining the Promise Scholarship, that there's money available for an A degree or certification in a trade or a field. So I would hope this new Corps and the people running it spend some time telling these 100 or 150, I think primarily younger people, but not necessarily, of those options, because they can get a free, I mean, if they find something they like, whether it's planting trees, whatever it is, and they say, I want to expand this skill, they should be told, whether it's Anne Arundel, whether it's Garrett County, whether it's Prince George's Community College, there are lots of options out there, and unfortunately, the school system and MHEC have dropped the ball in a very large way. So I think at a minimum, whether it's a directive to the staff after it's hired, or if there are floor amendments, adding something, whatever. I'm not falling on the sword here, but that is a clear shortcoming. And if they find an area they like, working with a nonprofit, there are other options to pursue that where it's actually free. So, okay, Senator Washington, last comment, question.
It's not a question, but it's a question generated by your statement. Is there a sort of a transition navigator or someone, so we've got regional operators bringing people in. Once someone is close to concluding the program, maybe 2 months out or 3 months out, is there a department or a group or a staff who's helping them navigate transition, who could make sure that they're aware of all existing programs from MHEC or any of those types of?
I've actually shared this with Ross about having an onboarding, offboarding. I know people have different feelings about the Chesapeake Bay Corps, but they do have, I think, a program where they bring the people together in the program and give them some knowledge and some even basic skill stuff. So I'm hoping that's included here, whether we need language or not, I just want to echo.
Sounds like there needs to be a staff person or someone whose job it is, who's basically doing sort of post-experience placement, right? Like what happens after that 9 months, because unfortunately, some of what I've seen over the, not going to say how many years that I've been around this space, is people just go from program to program to program, to training program to and they don't ever, get hooked into something. But there are programs where the nonprofit has someone whose job is to have relationships with people that can provide them with jobs after their placement.
Absolutely, and would just note two things. One, for the large-scale employers, the priority is given to those who have a demonstrated ability to bring people on full-time after their service year is completed. And would also just direct attention to page 4, lines 2 and 3. Again, on that list of wraparound services, job search and application support and college application support are included, that I think get at both what you and Chair Pinsky are talking about.
And final comment, then we'll go to a vote. I did some back of the envelope, as we want to do here. If in fact between their salary and benefits, health, whatever wraparound is 40,000, I think I heard that, and say there are 125 people, that alone comes to $5 million without staff. So we should understand, I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's not like they're going to have lots of staff going on here at first. I don't know what the projection is, but in the broad scope of things, while it's valiant and valuable direction we're going in, and I support it, I want to co-sponsor it, it's not rich with money, and I think it's going to be very limited to even give some of those wraparound services. So, but it is what it is. So, okay, yes. Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Co-sponsors, it has to be favorable with amendment.
Any objection? Let's get it on the floor first. It's been moved. It's been seconded. Any objection to the co-sponsor amendments? Seeing no objections, they're adopted. Further debate on the bill as amended. Senator.
So I don't know what the process here is. Are we taking up any?
hold your thought for a minute. Do any of the people who wanted to be added as a co-sponsor mind if they get added from the floor when it reaches the floor on second reader? Okay, so is there a motion to withdraw the amendment? It adds just more days going back to B&T. We can do it from the floor, we can prepare that, and there may actually be other amendments from the floor. So, any objection to withdrawing the co-sponsor amendment? Seeing no objection, it's off. The bill is before you in its posture. Now back to Senator Simoneer.
You actually went to my question. So I have a couple small amendments, and I've discussed some of them with Ross. So procedurally, would you rather us offer them from the floor to save time?
I have not, we have not had a conversation, I've not talked to the Senate President. My guess is yes, and then I don't know who the floor leader will be from B&T. It'll either be friendly or not friendly. Okay. So I would, is that correct, that you would prefer that?
Yes, and Senator Simoneer, line and work through that.
Okay, then we're sending it clean, but it doesn't preclude people from amendments from the floor. But I would either check with Ross or the floor leader from B&T. I don't think they'll object to the sponsor amendment, although we never know. Exactly. Okay, would anybody wish to be recorded in the negative on the favorable motion? Okay, I'll let you do that in just a second. So it's recorded as 10-0-1 absent, but if Senator Ellis comes back, he'll have an opportunity. Explaining your vote, Senator.
Mr. Chair, I'm in support of 220, what is it, 228 or something? Yeah. However, I still have some grave reservation about the overall implementation. I don't feel comfortable with the process of this whole piece of legislation. I think in part it's sort of headed in a direction, but I think it needs a lot more cleanups here and there. People need to understand this when they get it, and I would be highly concerned about the transparency approach. I haven't gotten too much in terms of people want to know and feel good, and this is a real good piece of legislation. I think we could get good mileage out of it. But I'm voting yes, but I'm voting reluctantly because I just simply don't fully understand the operation and the process of the piece of legislation. With that, I vote aye.
Bill receives a favorable 10-0-1 and will be sent back to B&T to be reported to the floor. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the other bill of the day, and that is Pfas, Senate Bill 273. The posture we left it in yesterday was was a favorable. There are some amendments. Did we adopt the amendments? I think we did. And then Senator Gallion offered an amendment, and then we put a hold on it to say we'd come back to it today. So I'm going to start with Senator Gallion, and then I believe there are some replacement amendments to the ones we adopted. Is that right? Senator.
Chair, I'd like to withdraw the amendment that I put forward. I talked with the bill sponsor, and hopefully, once, I still have some questions, but hopefully once we go through the latest amendment from the sponsor, hopefully some of those, my concerns will be addressed with that, and if there's any remaining, I'll bring them up at the appropriate time.
Any objection to withdrawal of the amendment proffered whenever that was, late last week on Thursday? Seeing no objection, the bill is in the posture prior to that amendment being offered. Let's let committee counsel walk us through it.
All right. So as a reminder, this is Senate Bill 273, Environment, PFAS Chemicals, Prohibitions and Requirements, the George Walter Taylor Act. So on your desk, I have distributed a little amendment packet. The first amendment is one that was adopted last Friday. This is the amendment that establishes the buyback program with a mandatory appropriation of $500,000 in fiscal year 2024 for the Department of the Environment to purchase the PFAS-containing firefighting foam from the local jurisdictions. So that was adopted last week. The next page, this is actually a substitute amendment because they're making some additional changes that sort of touched a piece of what was adopted last week. So much of this amendment is the same as 643921/1, which was adopted last week. So as a reminder, what that amendment did, it requires rather than authorizes MDE to adopt implementing regulations, delays the effective date of restrictions imposed under the bill to January 1st, 2024, applies the prohibition on distributing or selling rugs, carpets, or food packages that contain PFAS chemicals only to those who do so knowingly, and makes manufacturers rather than retailers or distributors solely responsible for the creation of certificates of compliance regarding PFAS chemicals added to rugs, carpets, or food packages. This amendment, in addition to that, it addresses this question of the definition of PFAS chemicals. So if you look on page 7, we're in the reprint of the bill right now, keeps the definition but narrows it down and says just when used in firefighting agents, firefighting equipment, food packaging, and rugs and carpets, which is really all this subtitle applies to. This is on the top of, sorry, at the bottom, so it's page 3 of 11 of the bill, but page 7 of the packet. So this says PFAS chemicals means when used in firefighting agents, firefighting equipment, food packaging, and rugs and carpets, a class of fluorinated organic chemicals that contain at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom, including, I'm not going to say that word, substances. The idea there is, again, that's all the subtitle really applies to, and that is to address the concerns of some companies that use similar chemicals, but not in these products that are covered by this subtitle. So that's the first change. The second change is on page 8 of the packet. So this is page 4 of 11 of the reprint. This does a couple of things. First of all, it delays just by another couple of months the effective date for the ban on using firefighting foam at airports, ports, a refinery, or a chemical plant. So the general ban, again, goes into effect January 1st, 2024. This would say that they have up until September 30th, 2024. And then even longer for terminals, and there's a definition of terminal. It's added earlier in the bill, but it's a bulk liquid storage facility exclusively engaged in the merchant wholesale distribution of petroleum products, including liquefied petroleum gas that contains at least one storage tank containing petroleum products, or a facility engaged in the distribution of crude petroleum from extraction or processing. So they would have through December 31st, 2027 to continue kind of using and buying these products. And finally, just clarifies that the bill already had sort of a carve-out for people who are required under federal law to use these products. This just sort of clarifies that authorization remains in place until federal law kind of says otherwise. So that's the next piece that's different. And that's really it. It's really just those two pieces that are sort of narrowed and changed from the last version of the amendment. So the motion would be to withdraw the the one adopted last week and to adopt this one in its place.
Let's do that first. Move to withdraw. Any objection to that? Seeing none. The Vice Chair moves the new set of amendments. Senator Gallion seconds. They are before us now. And before I call on Senator Riley, in terms of what it covers, it's really substantially the same. It doesn't change that. It's still rugs and carpets, food packaging, and the foam, essentially. Now, there are a few other parts that Ms. Morton just went over, but the coverage really, it's written differently, but it's substantially the same. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got two quick questions. Do you know what some of the federal exceptions are?
I don't off the top of my
Might it be military airports and shipyards, military shipyards? And
I would assume that that's what they're getting at, but I don't know off the top of my
okay,
head.
that's fine. Now, I want to focus on the airports. I've done some research on this stuff, and it's designed to cover liquid fires such as oil refineries, gasoline, jet fuel, and things of that nature. So what we're saying is, after September 30th, 2024, they can't use it at an airport.
Unless they're required to do under federal law.
Yeah, but again, BWI is mentioned specifically in here. I thought I saw BWI in here in a specific place. Can somebody help me out? Don't leave me hanging.
No, there's no specific mention of.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, there's a part that's being taken out that specifically mentioned BWI. So it's a repealed language.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Crows, followed by Senator Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 3, I'm sorry, on page 3 of the bill, page 7 of the packet, with the revised amendments, does this now, with this knowingly, does this cover those that, let's say, a deli's putting together a veggie tray, and they use plastic wrap? Does this knowingly now kind of cover them so they're protected, those small businesses?
So it's actually a later, you're looking at, this would be,
This is what you just handed out.
yes, but
So I was down on page
12.
7 where it says knowingly so. So I'm just trying to understand if that now covers
You're looking,
those.
that's the firefighting foam section though, so
Okay,
hold
so
on.
that's, all right, so then where would the section be for?
So food packaging is on page 12 of the voting packet, page 8 of 11 of the reprint. So, and this is, I have heard this argument from the retailers that they are concerned that somehow a deli that is wrapping a, meat tray or something in a package would be considered a manufacturer. I'm not entirely sure why they think that would be. Because, so this section, what it says is that a manufacturer or a distributor may not manufacture or knowingly sell, offer for sale, or distribute for sale food package to which PFAS chemicals were intentionally added. So for some reason, they think that doing that it would somehow be considered a manufacturer or manufacturing a food product, which I think is a stretch, but that is their concern.
So does this language cover them or not? Does it-
I would not interpret it as covering them, but they are concerned that it would.
Yeah, I mean,
So how would we?
line 16 on page 12 says a manufacturer or distributor. They're the two categories that are being talked about. A restaurant or deli, I don't think is a manufacturer or a distributor.
So on the food packaging, if you go to the next line, or distribute for sale, or in the state, a food package or food packaging. I think we're trying to protect those who would unknowingly, not knowing what's in there, and then the result is that product is in there, and then they're penalized. I think we're trying to prevent that unintended consequence.
Right, but again, line 16 says the classes we're talking about are manufacturers and distributors, not retailers.
Okay. I may need to come back to that with a question. My next question, and this committee and on the floor, we've been having conversations about penalties and the cost of the penalties. And rather than that first violation is $500, it seems fair that we would recommend a warning before they're hit with a $500 first violation.
So that's existing language, but on page 6, line 15 of the bill. So, sorry, which would be page 10 of the reprint.
And that's, I mean, we're talking about, some of these businesses coming out of this recovery, and and they're getting hit with a first violation of $500.
So, and this is for this is for firefighting foam. This is for the this is for the use of the firefighting foam, for the distribution or use of firefighting foam.
Yeah. Senator, I think this is on everybody's radar screen of manufacturers of PFAS. I don't think this is coming as a surprise. But, we'll come back to you. I think Senator, I don't know who I had next. I think I had Hester next. Then we'll go to Gag and then Riley.
So I really appreciate the line on the reprint page 7, bill page 3 at the top that says PFAS chemicals means when used in firefighting agents, firefighting equipment, food packaging, rugs and carpets, a class of fluorinated organic chemicals. So I really appreciate that line. My question is, then on page 9 of the reprint, we start talking about line 8. if a person sells personal protective equipment that contains PFAS chemicals in the state. So is PPE covered under firefighting equipment? Or if you're making PPE for the hospitals, like, is that not?
What?
No, I know the intent is turnout gear, but I'm wondering what's actually written on page 9.
I mean, if you wanted to clarify it, I think you could say personal protective equipment for firefighting or something like that. I mean, the subtitle only really applies to, firefighting foam and chemicals, or equipment, but
Because I know that there's, unfortunately, in like those disposable gloves and stuff, there's PFAS, right?
I don't know.
But you're saying that line 8 on page 5 is, they're supposed to be talking just about the firefighting stuff? Firefighting PPE?
That is my understanding, yes.
I mean, I'm not a bill drafter nor an attorney. If you go back to page 7, the bottom, it's section 6-1603. And line 26 talks about firefighting foam.
I'm neither a lawyer nor a person either. I just wanted to make sure that that was, because I didn't understand the intent of the bill to be covering all PPE produced in the state, so I just wanted to make sure that
I don't believe it is, but let me see if the. Yeah, so according to the sponsor, the intent is just to cover firefighting equipment. I do think that language could be tightened.
Yeah, could we do that?
Yes, we.
Because that's what I
At
thought
the will of
the
the body, you could, that could be clarified.
Okay, is there any objection to adding a sentence or something that says the personal protective equipment is related to firefighting, and it's not the broad context which we've come to know and not love over the last 2 years?
So
Okay.
I think I would just use maybe personal protective equipment used in firefighting.
Perfect, that's great, thank you.
I'm going to consider that a Hester amendment. Any objection to that? Seeing none, it's adopted. We still have a few more. Senator Gallion.
I did have one other question.
Either way.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you're on the roll.
So then, on the amendment, on the reprint, page 12, bill page 8, lines 18 and 19, going back to the deli tray wrapping, if I work at like the local Wegmans or something, and I just get this like generic saran wrap, and I buy it from a national distributor, do I call them and ask them if it's got PFAS in it before I make the purchase?
So the idea here would be, again, the burden is not meant to be on the retailers. It's meant to be on the manufacturers and distributors. And it says that you couldn't manufacture or distribute the product in the state, and that at the request of the Department of the Environment, you would have to provide a certificate of compliance that just indicates that your product is compliant with this law. Again, I think this is getting back to this question that the retailers have sort of raised is, are there circumstances under which a retailer might be considered the manufacturer of a food package? I really think that's a stretch under the way this bill is drafted.
I do
but
too.
if somebody has clarifying amendments, I think the.
But this isn't even them as a manufacturer, it's just like if they're buying something that's not manufactured in the state.
It doesn't, so there's, the prohibition is on manufacturers and distributors manufacturing or knowingly selling within the state. It's not on retailers.
Okay.
Yeah, as I mentioned last Thursday, there are not a whole lot of companies making PFAS. They're gonna know in Maryland, they can't sell or distribute in the state. And if, you know, we've seen what's happened when California's adopted something, they've changed their whole, because it's such a big piece of the United States, they actually change what they're doing. So they will know, those few people who manufacture or distribute it, that in Maryland, you can't sell it or distribute after a certain date. So, other questions or discussion on the replacement amendments? Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So last week, you know, I had concerns about what I felt was an overly broad definition of PFAS. So I do think the amendment helps with that. Honestly, I wish the firefighter foam thing was just, we had a separate bill. It's kind of, wasn't all kind of into one, but it is what it is. On the food packaging, you know, April mentioned that the intent's not for the burden to be on the retailer. So do we need to make that clarifying, or, I mean, is that, I mean, we've kind of had that discussion, but I mean, we're good with the amendment as drafted, that's clear enough, or do we, to be safe, should we add some kind of clarifying language on that?
That's a policy question.
Okay. Well, I was kind of asked the chair, I don't know which,
Look,
I'm not a bill drafter either, so.
as a layperson, I read a manufacturer distributor. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I think that's what the interpretation of the committee council. Look, if there's a way to do it, you know, I think we're all of the same mind. The question is whether we need it. And also, we don't, yeah, let me just stop there.
And I still think, you know, it would be nice if we could differentiate a little with the many different PFAS chemicals. I mean, we're not chemists. We're sitting on a committee and doing the best we can here. Sometimes I think, you know, there's maybe another body that could maybe do a little better job of defining that. But, you know, we're doing the best we can with a lot of different subject matter that comes before us. So, and one last point, you know, I had one concern about the way the bill was originally drafted, that, you know, medical components that are done would be negatively affected, but I think the amendment takes care of that. I mean, it limits it to those three items: the firefighting foam, carpet and rugs, and the packaging. So that does narrow it. So, you know, I appreciate, honestly, the bill's sponsor, you know, working on that to try to get it to a point where, you know, we're all more comfortable with it. So that's all I had.
Okay, the amendments are before us. On the amendments, I don't think we adopted them yet. All those in favor of adopting the replacement amendments signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill's amended is before us. Further discussion? Let's do a roll call. Okay, that takes care of our work for today. We have a voting session after hearing on Thursday. I'm afraid Thursday's going to be a long day. You're going to get a long list of bills. We will not stay until they're done. We will figure out when people have burned out enough. I think there's probably going to be 20 or 23 bills on it. I'm afraid we saw hearings. I thought today would be like a snap and be an hour, hour and a half, and of course, it wasn't. Thursday's got some bills on it that's going to take some time. I don't know, we might bring dinner in, I don't know.